At his parents' anniversary gala, he introduced her as someone special, right in front of me. I stood there in the dress his mother helped me pick, holding champagne and my dignity. That night he gave me a bracelet. The next morning I left him the divorce papers, my ring and a note. Don't call. I won't answer. By the time he noticed, I was already on a flight to Paris. I didn't scream when my husband introduced another woman to his family as someone special. That I smiled. I ordered another glass of wine and made a quiet mental note to call my lawyer in the morning. The ballroom of the country club glittered around me, soft amber light reflecting off crystal centerpieces, laughter rising in elegant swells. Ethan's parents were celebrating 40 years of marriage, and I was there to play my usual part, the quiet, well-dressed wife, composed and forgettable. And yet, not quite tonight. Tonight something had shifted. Across the room I watched my husband Ethan Carter, the man I had shared 7 years of my life with, rest his hand gently on the waist of a woman in a crimson dress. She was all charm and confidence, smiling at his parents like she'd known them for years. Her posture, the way she leaned into Ethan as he spoke, it was all too practiced. She wasn't a stranger. Not to him. Her name was Camille Hart, marketing executive, new hire at Ethan's firm. I recognized her instantly, though I'd never officially met her, mostly because her name had been showing up far too often on his calendar and late-night texts. Strategy dinner with Camille. Client lunch. Working late, Camille/team. I sipped my wine slowly. He wasn't hiding it anymore. What Ethan didn't know, and what no one else in this room could possibly guess, was that I had already accepted an offer to lead a groundbreaking vascular program at the Paris Surgical Innovation Institute. The decision had been made weeks ago. The resignation letter was drafted. My belongings were slowly vanishing from the house, box by box. He thought I would stay silent. He mistook my calm for complacency. What he didn't realize was that silence in the right hands can be deadly. "Lily," came a sharp, familiar voice behind me. I turned to face Eleanor Carter, Ethan's mother, wrapped in diamonds and polite disdain. "We weren't sure if you'd make it. You're always so busy with work." The smile I gave her had teeth. I wouldn't miss such a milestone. 40 years is something to admire, especially when your son can barely last 7. She laughed softly like I had said something clever. Her eyes flicked briefly to my dress, a cream silk column that Ethan used to love. Tonight he hadn't even noticed. "We were just being introduced to someone lovely," she said. "You should come meet her." She stepped aside with just enough flair to make it feel theatrical. "Lily, this is Camille Hart," she announced proudly. "Ethan says she's a rising star. He brought her tonight to meet the family." Camille turned, smiling warmly, though the flicker of recognition in her eyes gave her away. She hadn't expected to meet the wife. "Hi," she said, extending a manicured hand. "It's so nice to finally meet you." I took her hand and shook it firmly. "Camille," I repeated. "Marketing, right? Ethan's mentioned you." That was a lie. Ethan hadn't said a word, but his phone had. Her grip faltered slightly. "Yes," she said. "We've been working closely on the new regional campaign." "Of course," I said. "He does love a good campaign." Ethan appeared then, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He stopped abruptly when he saw me standing with them. "Lily," he said, blinking. "I didn't realize you'd arrived already." I tilted my head. "Clearly." He glanced at Camille, who stepped back politely, eyes darting toward the dance floor. "Can we talk?" he asked, already gesturing toward a quieter corner. I nodded, followed him a few steps and paused beside the coat check hallway. "You've met Camille," he said quietly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I have. She's part of the new team. I wanted my parents to meet her. You introduced her as someone special." "She is." He stopped. "I meant professionally." "Of course," I said. "Bringing her to your parents' anniversary party was purely a work obligation." He hesitated. "You're reading into this." "Am I?" I asked, voice soft but deliberate. "Because from where I stood, it looked like you brought your mistress to a family celebration and thought no one would notice." His lips parted, then closed. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "I didn't plan for." "You never do, Ethan. That's the problem." He stared at me, searching for something, guilt, forgiveness, maybe even a fight. But I didn't give him any of it. Instead, I stepped forward, kissed his cheek like a proper wife and whispered, "Enjoy the party." Then I turned and walked away. Later that evening, I found myself beside Ethan's father, Richard, who was cradling a tumbler of scotch and looking out over the dance floor. 40 years, I said, handing him a small wrapped box. Happy anniversary. He opened it slowly. Inside was a first edition collection of French poetry, the one Ethan had told me Richard loved but lost during their last move. You remembered, Richard said, eyes lighting up. Ethan mentioned this years ago. I didn't think anyone else had. Apparently, I listened better than your son. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're a good woman, Lily. I replied. Until I realized good doesn't mean respected. He turned to look at me fully. Whatever happens, thank you for everything. I nodded. You're welcome. I left the party just after 10. Ethan and Camille were laughing near the bar. His arm rested casually behind her chair. No one looked surprised. Not even his sister. I didn't say goodbye. Instead, I walked to the valet, handed over my ticket and waited under the covered entrance. When my car arrived, I slipped inside and closed the door without a word. I checked my phone. A new email had come in. Subject line: Bienvenue à Paris. Housing confirmation. I opened it. Your apartment on Rue Saint-Dominique will be available from the 17th. We're thrilled to welcome you to the Institute. Dr. Etienne Marchand. I exhaled slowly, then smiled. The bracelet Ethan had given me 2 weeks ago, sleek, diamond-encrusted and meaningless, glinted under the dashboard lights. He thought it was an apology. To me, it was a souvenir. I started the car and drove home to a house that no longer felt like mine. The next time I saw Ethan, I would already be gone. People like to think heartbreak is loud. That it comes crashing in with yelling, slammed doors, dramatic exits. But when Ethan stopped loving me, it was quiet. No affair yet, no fights, no shouting matches in the middle of the night. Just absence. Like waking up in a house where the heat's been off for days and realizing you were too numb to notice. It didn't start with Camille. It started with silence. I remember when Ethan used to ask about my surgeries. He'd sit across from me at the breakfast table, shirt half-buttoned, tie slung over his shoulder, and say, "Tell me something brilliant you did today." And I would. I told him about bypasses and valve reconstructions, and how it felt to save a life before noon. He used to light up, proud, impressed. But somewhere along the line the questions stopped. Then so did the eye contact. Eventually the only thing he asked was if we were out of oat milk. Eleanor Carter didn't help. She was never cruel, not exactly. But she made disapproval look like elegance. Polished, practiced little digs delivered with a smile. "She's always in surgery," she once told Ethan's aunt at brunch. "I'm not sure how she does it. It must be exhausting. Marriage is a job too, you know." I was sitting 3 feet away holding my coffee cup with both hands to keep from throwing it. Ethan didn't defend me. He never did when she spoke like that. He just offered a neutral, "She loves her work," like I was a well-meaning stranger. That was the day I began looking at jobs abroad. The offer from Paris came 2 weeks later. A formal email from the Institut de Médecine Vasculaire. Dr. Etienne Marchand had read my published trial from last year and invited me to apply for their newly funded innovation chair. It wasn't just a promotion. It was an escape hatch. And for the first time in months I felt something like hope. I didn't tell Ethan. I responded from my private email and began assembling documents. My certifications, teaching credentials, board approval letters. The application process wasn't fast, but it was precise. I handled it like I handled surgery, step by step, stitch by stitch. I also started removing myself from the house. Not enough to be obvious. A framed photo from our Santorini honeymoon went missing 1 week. The signed first edition poetry books I loved disappeared into storage the next. My grandmother's ring, which I kept in a drawer by the bed, I mailed to a vault in Paris. Ethan never noticed. One night I moved out all my French medical books and stacked them neatly in a box labeled, "Donate." He saw it in the hallway and asked, "Spring cleaning?" I nodded. Something like that. He kissed my cheek and went back to his laptop. The emotional shift was slow, deliberate. We went from missed dinners to separate bedrooms. At first he claimed his back hurt. Then he said he fell asleep working. Eventually we stopped pretending to notice. One night around 2 a.m., I heard him whispering in the hallway outside our bedroom. He said the name Camille. I didn't get up. I didn't cry. I simply opened my laptop, clicked on my Paris folder, and began filling out the housing application. Jenna called the next day. Have you told him? No. You're going to disappear on him. That's the point. Lily, she said gently. That's cold even for you. Not cold, I replied. Clinical. She was silent for a moment. Do you want me to slap him? Publicly? Because I'd look great doing it. I smiled faintly. Not yet. I opened a French bank account that Friday. Transferred enough to settle quietly. I didn't want a fight. I didn't want alimony. I didn't want anything he could use to rope me back in. I drafted my resignation letter the next morning. Rewrote it 5 times. The final version was simple. Subject: Resignation, Dr. Lily Carter. Dear board members, I am resigning from my post effective 2 weeks from today. I am deeply grateful for my time at Memorial and the opportunities extended to me. I've accepted an international leadership position that aligns with my research goals. I wish you all the best in the continued pursuit of excellence. Lily Carter, MD. I saved it in drafts. Stared at it for a long time. Then hit send. The confirmation came within hours. We're thrilled to welcome you to Paris. Orientation begins August 1st. Housing is reserved under your name. I stared at the email. It felt final. Not dramatic. Not joyful. Just right. That evening, Ethan walked in with a bottle of wine. For us, he said. Why? He shrugged. I don't know. Thought we could have a night. It was our first dinner together in weeks. We sat on opposite ends of the table. I poured the wine. He talked about work. I listened. He said Camille had been promoted. I nodded. She's smart, he said. Really intuitive. I'm sure she is. He looked at me across the candlelight. You've been quiet lately. Have I? He hesitated. Are you okay? I smiled politely. I'm preparing. For what? I finished my wine and stood. For something long overdue. Then I left him at the table and went upstairs. In the guest bedroom, the one I'd been sleeping in for the past 10 nights, my suitcase lay half full. Passport. Credentials. Letter of acceptance. A single photo of my mother. And my future. Folded. Ready. I stopped counting the boxes after the 6th one. Books, documents, keepsakes. Pieces of myself, slowly vanishing from the home I once tried so hard to fit into. The guest room closet had become a temporary archive of my life. The one Ethan no longer noticed. That morning I wrapped my French medical journals in thick brown paper, labeled the shipment private, professional, and slid it into the corner next to my suitcase. A few surgical models followed. Then my grandmother's ring, still in its velvet pouch, now destined for a Paris safety deposit box. All traces of Lily Carter, the version who waited, were vanishing. Not with a bang. With calm, clinical precision. Do you want to get dinner tomorrow? Ethan asked later that evening, leaning against the doorframe with an almost boyish awkwardness. I glanced up from my laptop. Dinner. Yeah. Thought it might be good. Casual. I paused. With. He scratched his neck. Camille might join us. I let the name settle between us. She's been helping with that new project, he added quickly. It's not a big deal. I thought maybe we could all. Sure, I said smoothly, cutting him off. His shoulders lowered. Yeah. I nodded. Why not? He looked relieved. I watched him memorizing this version of Ethan. The one still oblivious, still convinced I'd always play along. Tomorrow he would bring me to dinner with his mistress. Tomorrow I'd let him. The next day, I folded the signed divorce documents and placed them into a sealed envelope. I walked to Ethan's office upstairs and slipped them neatly into the drawer beneath his quarterly reports, the one file he always checked on Sundays. Then I took out a sticky note and wrote 5 words in clean cursive. You'll read this once I'm gone. I left it on top. No dramatic reveal. No last-minute argument. Just the truth waiting patiently in paper form. Dinner was at one of Ethan's favorite downtown spots. Dim lighting, exposed brick, and just upscale enough to feel like a reward. Camille was already seated when we arrived, wearing a slate blue dress and trying hard not to look startled when she saw me walking in beside him. Lily, she said standing. So nice to see you again. You too, I said warmly, though I watched her eyes search mine for clues. She wouldn't find any. My face was a locked vault tonight. We sat. Ethan made polite small talk while the waiter poured wine. I've been meaning to thank you, I said, turning to Camille, for helping Ethan at work. She blinked. Oh, of course. It's nothing. On the contrary, I replied. I imagine he keeps you very busy. There was a pause. Just long enough to sting. She's been a huge asset, Ethan jumped in, trying to steady the tone. Really stepped up during the team restructure. I'm sure, I said with a pleasant smile. He tends to gravitate toward people who make his life easier. Camille shifted in her seat. She reached for her water glass but missed slightly, her hand trembling just a bit. Ethan didn't notice. I did. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of polite tension. I asked Camille about her hobbies. She lied and said yoga. Ethan talked about a new campaign. I nodded. Camille barely ate. Ethan barely looked at me. By the time dessert arrived, I had mentally moved into my Paris apartment already. In the car ride home, Ethan seemed nervous. You were really composed tonight, he said. I'm always composed. I mean, considering everything, it was gracious of you. Gracious, I echoed. What a lovely word. He sighed. Lily, I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't plan any of this. I turned toward the window. Streetlights flicked across the glass like ghosts. That's the thing about you, Ethan. You never plan. You just drift. He didn't reply. I closed my eyes and let the silence settle between us. Back at home, I showered, braided my hair, and slipped into a long cotton robe. The envelope was still waiting in his drawer. The last artifact of a marriage I no longer lived in. I sat at my desk and refreshed my inbox. There was. Subject. Confirmation, Paris apartment. Your apartment lease at 17 Rue Saint-Dominique is confirmed. Key handoff on arrival. We look forward to your start on the 1st. Admin, Paris Surgical Institute. I exhaled. Not relief. Not fear. Just quiet finality. I stood, walked to the jewelry box and opened the lid. The bracelet Ethan gave me for our anniversary. White gold, delicate diamonds, and so hollow it barely made a sound. Sat where I'd left it. I slipped it on for a moment and stared at my reflection. Then I took it off and placed it next to the divorce papers. Let him keep it. Let him call it a memory. The next morning I made coffee as usual. Ethan came downstairs still in pajamas, yawning and scratching his chest. Thanks for last night, he said, leaning against the counter. I handed him a mug. Of course. I was thinking we should plan a weekend away. Oh. Napa maybe. Or London. Just us. I smiled softly. Let me check my schedule. He kissed the top of my head and wandered off toward the patio. I stared at his retreating back, then looked down at my phone. Flight to Paris. Confirmed. July 17th. 2 more days. 2 more mornings. And then, freedom. The end didn't feel like fire. It felt like air, silent, invisible, but unmistakably there. I sat in Cassandra's office across a glass-topped desk, her red lipstick as sharp as the clasp of her fountain pen. You're sure you don't want them served while you're still stateside? She asked, sliding the final folder toward me. I'm sure, I said, signing each page with calm certainty. He'll find them soon enough. You're trusting him to discover a divorce through paperwork? I smiled faintly. I'm trusting him to be exactly as inattentive as he's always been. Cassandra gave a small, impressed laugh. Cold. No, I said, capping the pen. Clean. She leaned back. I've wired everything to the French legal contact. Your Paris, Idaho and healthcare documents will be processed on arrival. I nodded, standing and slipping the folder into my bag. And Lily, she added. You don't owe him an explanation. I'm not planning to give one. I spent the afternoon saying goodbye to places that had never truly been mine. The rooftop at Memorial Hospital where I used to stand after late surgeries and breathe in the dusk. The nurses' station where old coffee jokes lived. A cafe 3 blocks down that served burnt espresso and still managed to comfort me after rough days. At each stop I stood quietly. No tears. No second thoughts. Only this: you tried. You gave. You outgrew. I sat on the weathered stone bench in the park near our old apartment, where I used to meet my late mentor, Dr. Maris, after long shifts. She once told me, Don't confuse patience with self-burial. I had. For too long. But not anymore. That evening, Jenna came barreling into my house with 2 coffees and war in her eyes. You're leaving, she said, barely pausing at the door. For Paris. I took 1 coffee. I am. You weren't going to tell me? I was going to text you from Charles de Gaulle. She groaned. You are infuriating. Do you know how long I've wanted you to drop-kick that man into traffic? Jenna. I mean it. 1 dramatic slap. Just 1. In public. He deserves at least that. I don't want an audience, I said. I want peace. She slumped into my armchair, pouting. You're too elegant. It's disgusting. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. We sat in silence for a moment, sipping bitter coffee that tasted like endings. She looked at me and asked, You sure this is what you want? I nodded. It's the only thing I've wanted in a long time that's actually for me. That night I returned to our bedroom, or more accurately his bedroom, and stared at the 4 shirts he hadn't noticed were missing. The suitcase in the guest room was now zipped shut. I tucked the folded copy of my Paris offer letter into the front pocket, then turned to the bedside table and left a post-it. Check your office drawer. Oh. Then I stepped onto the balcony and stood barefoot on the cold tile, watching the city hum quietly around me. No rage. No regret. Just relief. Below, the traffic lights blinked like slow, sleepy eyes. Across the room, my phone buzzed with a check-in notification from Air France. Flight AF 179, Paris Charles de Gaulle. Confirmed. Ethan was downstairs, probably watching sports, texting Camille, sipping whiskey without offering me any. I leaned forward into the night and whispered it to myself like a prayer. Goodbye, Lily. Not because I was leaving, but because I was finally arriving. The bracelet was beautiful. I'll give him that. White gold. Thin enough to whisper rather than shout. A row of flawless diamonds, small and elegant, like the promises he used to make in the quiet moments between ambition and neglect. He handed it to me over breakfast, still in his robe, barely awake. I saw it last week, he said. Made me think of you. I turned the velvet box in my hands slowly, as if it might crack open and reveal something more sincere beneath the sparkle. It's lovely, I said. And it was. But so are funeral arrangements. He smiled, clearly relieved, and poured himself coffee like we were normal, like we hadn't been living in parallel dimensions for months. You've been quiet lately, he added casually, sipping. I figured maybe this would help. I don't know, reset things a little. Reset. Like we were a router. Or a broken screen. Not a marriage. He suggested Santorini that night. It used to be our dream trip. Back when we still had them. We could just go, he said, standing in the doorway of my guest room. Clear your schedule. No phones. Just us. Like we used to talk about. I glanced up from my tablet. That's kind of spontaneous for you. He smiled, boyish. That's the point. I gave him the softest nod I could manage. Let me think about it. That was enough for him. He didn't push. He never pushed. That was always part of the problem. The bracelet sat on my vanity the rest of the week. I never wore it. Not once. But I didn't throw it away either. It wasn't rage I felt, not anymore. Just distance. He was trying now in his own half-hearted, performative way. Maybe out of guilt. Maybe panic. Or maybe because he saw the same vacancy in my eyes that Camille must have seen across dinner. He thought the gesture bought him time. He thought time could buy me back. He was wrong on both counts. Wednesday afternoon, my final confirmation from Paris came through. Subject. Orientation schedule plus residency approval. Dear Dr. Carter, we are thrilled to confirm your official onboarding with the Institut de Médecine Vasculaire. Your residency permit has been approved. Your badge and ID will be issued on day 1. Dr. Etienne Marchand. I stared at the message for a long time. Not to read it. Just to feel the weight of it. It was done. All of it. No more hiding. No more doubting. No more checking over my shoulder to see if Ethan noticed the life I'd been peeling away from him piece by piece. He hadn't. He still hadn't. That evening, Ethan knocked gently before stepping into the guest room again. Did you think about it? He asked. Santorini. I turned toward him slowly. I don't think now's the time. His mouth opened slightly, ready to argue, but he didn't. He nodded. I just want us to be okay, he said after a moment. We've both been so busy. I know I haven't been perfect. I know I've been distracted. Distracted. Interesting choice of word. He crossed his arms, leaned against the doorway. You and me, we've always made it through rough patches. Haven't we? I said nothing. He took that as agreement. I'll give you space, he said. But I'm not giving up on this. I smiled then. And to his credit, he thought it was real. That night, I opened the velvet bracelet box one last time. I held the diamonds in my palm, cool, delicate, expensive. Then I placed it carefully in the center drawer of my vanity, next to the ring box he proposed with. The one I hadn't opened in over a year. Let him keep both. Let them sparkle like unopened truths. In the hallway, I passed the large wedding photo still hanging above the staircase. We were laughing in it, or rather I was. Ethan's expression had always been more composed. Calculated. The photo had felt perfect when we picked it. Now it felt staged. Almost foreign. Later that night, I curled into my guest bed. Not from sadness, not even from fear. Just stillness. I stared at my phone until it buzzed. Air France, final reminder. Online check-in opens in 48 hours. I tapped the screen gently, then flipped the phone face down and closed my eyes. In 2 days, I would walk through an airport terminal without looking back. And maybe for the first time in years, I would belong entirely to myself. I woke before the sun. There was no alarm, no final jolt of panic. Just the soft realization that today was the day. The house was still quiet. The kind of quiet I used to resent. But today it felt like a blessing. I moved through it barefoot, each step deliberate. I knew exactly where every floorboard creaked, exactly which cabinet stuck. I knew this house better than the man I shared it with. And in a few hours it would no longer be mine. I made coffee. It was the same brand I always bought, the same blend Ethan never noticed. I let it brew while I opened the windows, letting in the cool morning air. The silence wrapped around me like linen. Soft, crisp, clean. My suitcase stood by the door, zipped and upright. The smaller duffel, passport, flight info, cash, phone charger, sat beside it like a faithful companion. I opened the drawer in the foyer and placed the last things down carefully. My wedding ring. The diamond bracelet. Our house key. And the signed divorce papers, neatly sealed in an envelope. On top, I left one final note. Don't call. I won't answer. This is not a mistake. Lily. Upstairs, I could hear the muffled sound of drawers opening, Ethan getting dressed. He had no idea. No clue that this was the last morning we would ever share under the same roof. And I wanted to keep it that way. He didn't deserve a goodbye. He deserved silence. I took one last walk through the house. Past the kitchen where we once laughed over burned toast. Past the bedroom where I once cried quietly while he slept beside me. Past the hallway where our wedding photo still hung, its perfect smile frozen in time. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Some things are better left like that, untouched, outdated, irrelevant. As I opened the front door, the morning air greeted me with a gentle chill. The car was already packed. I stepped outside just as the sun crept over the horizon, casting everything in gold. It should have felt dramatic, symbolic. It didn't. His felt right. I had just shut the trunk when I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Lily. Ethan's voice, still groggy. You're up early. I didn't turn around. Heading to the hospital, I called over my shoulder. Early consult. Want me to walk you out? No need. Pause. Want me to make you coffee? Already did. Another pause. A beat longer this time. Okay, he said finally. Have a good day. I will. And I meant it. I slid into the driver's seat and took a long, steadying breath. For the first time in years, I had nothing left to explain. I backed out of the driveway slowly. As the car turned toward the road, I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror. Ethan was standing at the doorway, cup in hand, watching the street, but not really looking. Not for me. Never for me. Just watching. Unknowing. Exactly the way I wanted it. The airport was surprisingly calm for a Saturday. I moved through security like muscle memory, phone tucked in one hand, boarding pass in the other. At the gate, I sat quietly by the window and watched the plane arrive. It gleamed in the morning light, pale white and pristine, like a page finally turning. My phone buzzed once. Ethan, dinner tonight? I was thinking pasta. Or maybe something with saffron. Used to love saffron. I stared at the screen. Then I turned it off. and didn't turn it back on. When they called my group to board, I stood, gathered my bag, and walked forward. No backward glances. No second guessing. Just one final breath. Then I crossed the threshold. And left him behind. The first thing I noticed was the light. Paris morning light is nothing like home. It doesn't stream, it lingers. It wraps around corners, slips through lace curtains, and paints everything in a soft gold that makes even loneliness feel like luxury. The apartment on Rue Saint-Dominique was small but perfect. Cream walls, wrought iron balcony, shelves already lined with medical journals I'd shipped in advance. The smell of citrus cleaner and old wood welcomed me in like an old friend. I walked to the window, cracked it open, and let the city seep in. Cars. Birds. A woman humming to herself as she walked by with a baguette in hand. I wasn't someone's wife here. I wasn't someone's afterthought. I was just Lily. And that was more than enough. By afternoon, I was standing in front of the Institut de Médecine Vasculaire, passport folder under one arm, lab coat over the other. The building was sleek, white stone with navy signage, and the receptionist greeted me in soft, accented English. Dr. Carter, bienvenue. A man appeared in the hallway, striding toward me with warm authority. Dr. Marchand, I said, offering my hand. Lily, he replied, shaking it. Or may I say, finally, Lily. We've been eager for this day. We walked side by side down polished corridors as he gave a tour. Surgical suites. Teaching wings. A rooftop garden for the staff. Everything was efficient, precise, and new. Just like me. I met the team in the cardiovascular wing. 5 surgeons, a group of interns, and 3 research staff. All sharp, all welcoming. No one asked who I was married to. No one introduced me by my husband's name. When I presented my first case study, they listened. When I spoke, they took notes. It was a strange kind of kindness, to be seen fully from my mind instead of my last name. I didn't realize how much I'd missed it until it was handed back to me. Back home, or whatever that house in the suburbs now was, I imagined Ethan opening the drawer, finding the divorce papers, the ring, the bracelet, and the note. Maybe he stood there, stunned. Maybe he didn't believe it. Maybe he laughed, thinking it was a threat, a bluff, something I'd undo with a phone call and an apology. But I hadn't taken a bluff to Paris. I had taken my name. And left his behind. I spent the evening unpacking, slowly, deliberately. 1 box of French novels. 1 scarf my mother gave me before she passed. 1 framed photo of me in scrubs, beaming after my first solo bypass. No wedding photos. No traces of him. I cooked pasta with olive oil and garlic, ate it on the floor, and listened to jazz through the speakers the Institute had sent as a welcome gift. No one asked what I was doing. No one expected anything from me. The silence was no longer empty. It was mine. That night, I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling nothing but lightness. Not joy. Not grief. Just air. Breathable. Quiet. Whole. Somewhere across the ocean, a phone rang. Ethan called 3 times that night. He left 1 voicemail. Lily, where are you? I don't understand. Just call me. We can fix this. Please. He didn't cry. He didn't apologize. Because in his world I was still part of it. He hadn't realized yet that I wasn't. That I never would be again. When I finally turned off my phone for good, I placed it beside my stethoscope on the table and went to the window. Below, the city was glowing, not blinding, not loud. Just alive. I opened the glass, took a deep breath, and smiled. The thing no one tells you about silence. Once you learn to live inside it, everything else feels too loud. Paris was quiet in the way I needed. Mornings started with jasmine tea and warm bread from the bakery below. I walked to the Institute early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My lab coats were pressed, my ID badge clipped to the inside of my collar. Not flaunted, just steady. I was no longer anyone's +1. My name stood on its own here. And it was enough. The vascular ward hummed with innovation and calm. Dr. Marchand respected precision and brevity. My kind of language. During rounds, the interns followed my words with the reverence I used to reserve for Ethan's approval. Funny how little I missed it. One of them, Sophia, a brilliant resident with a steel backbone, asked if I'd be attending the Global Surgical Congress in New York next month. They're flying in speakers from Tokyo, Seoul, London, she said. Apparently Dr. Ethan Carter is doing a keynote. The name landed like a soft breeze. Once sharp, now nothing. Not this year, I said, placing a file gently on her tablet. I think I've had enough American drama for a lifetime. That evening I found the invitation in my inbox. Subject: Honored Guest Invite, 42nd Annual Global Surgical Congress, NYC. I stared at the digital gold foil for a moment. Front row. Speaking slot optional. All expenses covered. Once I would have felt honored. Once I would have asked Ethan what to wear. Now I clicked decline without hesitation. No explanations. No second thoughts. Just freedom. Jenna arrived in Paris 2 days later with a giant duffel and a bottle of French wine she insisted on opening before noon. This place is disgustingly adorable, she said, dropping her bag and spinning in my kitchen. Is that a fireplace? Do you even know how to light one? No, I said. But I like how it looks. He paused, watching me. You're glowing. It's the pastry, I deadpanned. No, Lily. It's you. I looked away. God, she sighed. You're really not going back, are you? Was that ever a question? She dropped onto the couch with a dramatic groan. I was hoping you'd at least go to that gala where something devastating make Ethan pass out from your hotness. I raised an eyebrow. You realize that's your fantasy, right? Not mine. Yeah, but mine has better lighting and better revenge music. I laughed, pouring us both wine. Peace isn't about being seen. It's about not needing to be. She clinked her glass against mine. You're insufferably wise now. I've been resting, I said. Turns out it changes everything. We sat on the balcony that night, overlooking the flickering streets. Jenna wrapped herself in one of my throw blankets and kicked her feet up. Do you think he's panicking? She asked. Back home. Probably. Do you care? I took a sip of wine. No. Somewhere in New York, Ethan was probably practicing a speech. Wearing cufflinks I once bought him. Smiling in the mirror, wondering if I'd show up and let the world see he hadn't lost me. He had. He just didn't know how completely yet. And I wasn't going to give him the closure he refused to earn. The next morning I opened my email to find a follow-up message from the gala committee. We hope you'll reconsider joining us. I didn't. I opened the message, clicked delete and smiled. Let Ethan have his audience. I had something better. Silence that didn't ache. Work that fulfilled. And peace that was finally mine. The days in Paris had started to blur. Not from monotony but from contentment. I knew the street vendor who sold me fresh flowers on Wednesdays. I knew the pharmacist on Avenue Rap who always slipped extra bandages into my bag. I knew the schedule of the fruit seller's cart that passed my apartment just before sunrise. For the first time in my life, I lived without waiting for someone to ask where I was going or when I'd be back. No check-ins. No explanations. No versions of myself shaped to be palatable for someone else's expectations. Just life. Mine. And it was enough. At the institute I had begun mentoring residents during their rounds. Sophia followed me like a shadow, always asking questions, always eager. Dr. Marchand called her your echo, and I found myself smiling more than I ever had in the or back home. Have you thought about lecturing full-time next year? He asked over coffee one morning. I've thought about a lot of things, I said, stirring sugar into my cup. And for once I'm not rushing toward anything. He nodded, then quietly added, you seem at peace. Caught me off guard. As I was back in New York, the press had started to circle Ethan like vultures. It began with whispers. Camille's name tied to a missing financial report during a fundraising quarter. Then came the leaked email chains, vague, flirtatious, badly timed. Donors pulled out. Clients whispered. A colleague from Memorial messaged me. You left at the perfect time. His name's turning toxic in the field. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I simply closed the message, poured more tea, and walked to my balcony as the bells of Notre Dame chimed in the distance. Ethan tried again. A week later my email pinged. Subject: What really happened? Lily. I don't even know where to start. I didn't think you'd actually leave, not like that. Camille was never. It wasn't what you think. Can we talk? Please. I'm drowning here. I just need to hear your voice. I stared at the screen. Then clicked archive. No anger. No triumph. Just stillness. At the institute we launched a new surgical trial that week. I was selected as lead. A position Ethan once said I'd never get because I was too clinical, not charismatic enough for PR. Funny how in Paris that same trait earned me a standing ovation. The patients were complex, the cases relentless, the hours long, but they belonged to me. Every success stitched itself into the skin I was regrowing layer by layer. I came home tired, but never drained. Never erased. Jenna called from New York. You've officially outlived him. I'm not keeping score. You don't have to. The universe is. I could hear the smile in her voice. But I wasn't smiling. I was too far removed now. His downfall didn't feel victorious. It felt irrelevant. Ethan Carter was no longer a chapter. He was a footnote. One evening, Sophia handed me a letter after rounds. I found this in the interdepartmental mail. It's addressed to you. I opened it. Typed, anonymous. But unmistakably Ethan. I thought you'd be watching. You always were the only one who saw everything. But you're not watching, are you? You're not even looking back. For the first time in a long time I pitied him. Because he was right. I wasn't looking back. The next morning I stood in the center of the operating theater as the staff assembled for a new procedure. My name was listed as lead. The resident introduced me to a visiting surgeon from Switzerland. This is Dr. Carter, she said with pride. He reached for my hand. It's an honor. I shook it and smiled. And for once the name didn't feel borrowed. It felt like mine. The news broke on a Monday. I was halfway through reviewing a case study when my phone lit up with a flurry of notifications. Ethan's name. Camille's name. Phrases like unethical conduct, resignation expected, and financial irregularities. The Institute's chief PR officer knocked gently and held out a printed statement. Someone's asking if you'd like to make a comment, she said gently. I read the headline once, then passed the paper back. No, I said simply. That chapter is closed. I turned off my phone and went back to my notes. It wasn't out of cruelty. It wasn't indifference. It was peace. I had done my grieving long ago, quietly, thoroughly. His ruin didn't bring relief or triumph. It simply confirmed what I already knew. I was never supposed to save him. I was supposed to leave. And I did. The letter arrived a week later. Not by email. Not by courier. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name. Inside. Lily. I won't ask you to respond. I know you won't. I wouldn't either. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything really. I just wanted you to know. I was wrong. About you. About everything. You were the only thing in my life I didn't earn. And the only thing I regret losing. I hope Paris is kind to you. I folded the letter once. Twice. Then lit a match and fed it into the kitchen sink. Ash curled at the edges. The ink faded. And when it was gone I rinsed it away. The next morning, I walked along the Seine with a warm croissant in hand and no destination. The air smelled like bread and rain. The city hummed like a lullaby. My name was on the teaching board at the institute now. My students called me Dr. Carter without hesitation. My lectures filled with questions, notebooks, and curiosity. I had built this life, thread by thread. No man's name behind me. No shadow stretching over my days. Just me. That night I cleaned my apartment while soft jazz played in the background. I folded the sweater I wore on my first day in Paris and placed it gently in the drawer. Poured myself a cup of lavender tea. Arranged the tulips Jenna sent in a chipped vase by the window. I didn't need confetti or grand declarations. Peace rarely announces itself. It just arrives. And stays. I sat on the balcony, legs tucked under me, watching the lights shimmer off the Eiffel Tower in the distance. My phone buzzed once. Sophia, are we still on for rounds at 6? I replied, always. Then I turned my phone over, leaned my head against the railing and closed my eyes. The quiet. The softness. The stillness I chose. It was the ending no one else ever gave me. So I gave it to myself. The end.